Welcome back to the Place We Find Ourselves podcast. I'm Adam Young, and today I'm going to attempt to answer a question that I get asked a lot. And the question is simply, what if I don't remember very much about my childhood? What if you are a person who wants to engage your story, but when you think back on your growing up years, you just don't remember very much? First of all, let me say this. It can be incredibly frustrating if you are someone who wants to do this work, who believes in the importance of engaging your story, and yet who can't seem to remember very much about your own story. This can be so frustrating. Second, please know that there is nothing wrong with you if you don't remember very much. Nothing. If you don't remember much, there is a reason for that. And by the way, I have put together a free document that summarizes today's episode and also provides some exercises to help you remember your stories. And if you want, you can get it by going to adamyoungcounseling.com and clicking on resources. More often than not, people who can't remember much of their childhood are avoidantly attached. It's not always true, but if you have trouble remembering stories from your growing up years, it is likely that you are avoidantly attached. What does that mean? What is avoidant attachment? I'll do a quick review. And if you want a document that explains attachment in general and avoidant attachment in particular, you can get that by going to my website and clicking on resources. Okay, avoidant attachment. What is it? Attachment refers to the manner in which you connect with others. It's the emotional bond that you develop with the people you are closest to, the people who are there for you and who truly know you. Here's the catch, though. What if one or both of your primary caregivers were not there for you when you needed them? What if one or both of your parents were not attuned to you, not responsive to you, not engaged with you, not there for you? What if there was not a deep relational connection between you and your parents? That is what leads to an avoidantly attached adult. An avoidantly attached adult had a primary caregiver who was unavailable, dismissive, or rejecting. Attachment is about feeling like your caregiver is there for you and responsive to you when you feel distressed, like afraid or sad or mad. Responsive to you when you are in a place of distress. In the case of avoidant attachment, when the child becomes distressed, his or her caregiver does not provide sufficient comfort, care, connection. When the child tries to communicate their distress, their attempts have little to no effect on the parent. So the child is forced to calm himself or herself and regulate their own emotions. The child adapts by avoiding closeness in interpersonal relationships, hence the term avoidant attachment. And if you want more on attachment, you can listen to podcast episodes 5 and 7 where I go into it in great detail. Now, here's the thing. If you are avoidantly attached, it is unlikely that you are going to think back on your growing up years and say, yeah, my mom was dismissive of me. Or, yeah, that's right, my dad wasn't there for me when I was distressed, and so I'm probably avoidantly attached. You're not going to be thinking that right now unless you've done a lot of work on your story already. Why? Because think about this. If you grew up in a home that was devoid of deep relational connection, how are you supposed to know that? The level of relational connection that you had with your parents was just normal for you. It's just the way things were. How are you supposed to know if you were missing something? No, instead of feeling like my parents were dismissive of me and unavailable, it is far more likely that you will have a sense of, my childhood was all right, I guess. I mean, nothing really bad happened. This is so important to understand. If you were missing something as a kid, you are not going to know that as an adult unless you've done a lot of work on your story already. Why aren't you going to know that you are missing care, comfort, connection? Because whatever level of care and comfort you did receive, it was normal for you. It's just the way things were for you as a child, and so it felt normal. So, if you are listening to this and you don't remember much from your childhood, And you have this sense of, my childhood was pretty okay, I think. I mean, not much really happened. I don't remember any really bad things happening. If that's your sense, please keep listening. Consider the following byproducts of avoidant attachment. When avoidantly attached kids grow up to become adults, they will tend to be characterized by the following things. They will recall facts about their life, such as where they lived, what school they attended, the make and model of their first car, but they will have great difficulty recalling memories of family experiences where there was an authentic emotional engagement. Second, they will idealize their parents. Why? To avoid connecting with how bad it really was. And so the natural defense mechanism is just to idealize your parents. Third, they will tend to minimize or downplay hurtful attachment experiences. Fourth, they will insist that the past has little to no influence on their present life. And fifth, they will believe that family life has little to no effect on how they developed. So that's just a short list. It's not exhaustive, but those are the kinds of things that will characterize adults who are avoidantly attached. Now, can you relate to any of those bullets? Do you, for example, believe that your family experiences growing up had little to no effect on your development? That my family just, I had some experiences, some good, some bad, but it really doesn't affect me that much now, so what's the point of looking at it? Well, consider this. How can you know that your family experiences had no impact on you if you cannot recall those family experiences? This is an example of what's called narrative incoherence. It just doesn't make sense. It's not your fault. It's not that you're dumb. You just might be avoidantly attached, which means that you are going to have a hard time remembering many stories from your growing up years. Which brings us back to the purpose of today's episode. What do I do if I don't remember much from my childhood? And this is what I want to spend the rest of our time exploring. First of all, it is likely that you do remember some stories. It is likely that you do remember some stories, and you may be minimizing the stories that you do remember. In other words, you might say, I don't remember anything, but what you really mean is I don't remember anything significant or traumatic or really bad or harmful. You may have stories that you do in fact remember, but you are dismissing them as no big deal. And what I want to say is this: don't be so sure that these stories are no big deal. Don't be so sure that these anecdotes, that these snippets of stories that you do remember are not chock full of data that can be mined and that can be very valuable as you pursue and to understand your story. When I first began to reflect on my story, I remembered a couple of incidents that happened to me as a kid, but I thought to myself, that wasn't a big deal. I don't see how that could have affected me today. It doesn't seem like a story worth telling. And now that others have spoken into those stories, and now that I have reflected on them, I see that those very stories have had a profound effect on me, and that they were deeply traumatic, but I didn't know that when I first wrote them down. I felt a bit foolish when I first wrote them down because they didn't seem like a significant event, story happening in my life. So, what if you wrote down one or two of the stories that you do remember, even if you don't think they were a big deal? Even if you don't see how that story could have affected you then or could be affecting you today. What moments or scenes stand out, even partial stories? You can mine even the smallest, seemingly insignificant moments for useful tidbits. Also, and this is essential, you have to remember that you were younger in these stories. Very often, when we remember a story about ourselves as a 10-year-old, we think that 10-year-old should know everything that we now know as an adult. But she was only 10. Or she was only 7. You have to remember how innocent and trusting many of you were when you were little. Pay special attention to a story or an event when your own response is dismissive. By dismissive, I mean you have this sense of, I don't know why this story bothers me. It really wasn't that big of a thing, but I keep thinking about it. Or, I don't know why I even remember this snippet of a story, but I do. Why not write that story or write that snippet of a story and see what happens inside of you as you are writing it? See what emotions come up. See where the story takes you. And then, and this is critical, what would it be like to read the story to someone else who has engaged their own story and can therefore help name you well in yours? Now, what do I mean by naming you in your story? Very often we don't understand the stories that we write because we're too close to them. We often need a wise guide to help us. This can be a skilled friend or a trained counselor, someone who has done enough of their own work that they can name you accurately in your story. So, for example, you may have written a story about the time you were humiliated in middle school by a teacher. You have named the humiliation. What you haven't named is that at the end of the story, there's a paragraph about telling your mother what happened to you that day. And your mother doesn't do anything about it. She is utterly unresponsive to your heart. You have named the mockery by your teacher. You've named the humiliation. What you haven't named is the abandonment by your mother. You have not been named as an orphan, and yet you are one, at least in this story. Now, when you read this story to another person, hopefully someone who can hold the story, when you do that, notice what comes up inside as you are reading. Very often, you will feel big feelings reading your story to another person, feelings that you didn't necessarily feel when you were writing it. There is something about speaking the words aloud in the presence of a wise and loving guide that often connects us to our feelings. And if this doesn't happen for you, no problem. Hey, that's okay. This is about welcoming your stories the way you would welcome a guest at dinner. It's a posture of, you are welcome here around our table, and we are glad that you are here. Welcoming the stories that you do have access to often connects you to other stories. Moreover, welcoming the stories that you do have access to often prepares you for stories that you are not yet ready to engage. There is no such thing as a wasted story writing exercise, even if you don't gain lots of insight or understanding about yourself. Okay, that's number one. Write out the stories that you do remember. Don't minimize them. Don't dismiss them. Number two, get your hands on as many photo albums as you possibly can. Find every photo of yourself as a child, particularly photos in which you are not smiling. Get every photo from 0 to 18, your school portraits, all of it, as much as you can get your hands on. Then carve out some quiet time to be alone and just look at the photos. And notice what comes up inside as you are looking at these photos of yourself as a boy or a girl. Is there a particular photograph that moves you? That makes you sad? That makes you angry? If so, stop there and keep looking at that particular photo. Sit with the emotions that come up and just be with your heart. Is there a particular photo that you really don't like to look at for reasons that you can't quite name? If so, that matters. Your body is telling you something important. Be curious about why you don't like looking at this photo. See what comes up inside. As you are looking through photographs, here are some questions you can ask yourself. What are the facial expressions of your mother? Of your father? Who is missing in the photos? What patterns do you notice in the photographs over time? In other words, who is present, who is absent, who smiles, who doesn't? What events were considered photo-worthy in your family? And what does that tell you about your story? Does the light go out of someone's eyes from one time period to another? You're looking at photographs from ages 4 to 12, and then something just shifts in the photographs in late middle school and high school. What do you know about the time when the shift took place? What memories or associations do you have with the clothing that people are wearing in the pictures? And always, what feelings do you have in your body as you look at a particular photo? Sometimes our strongest feelings are for ourselves in individual photos, and this is often true for school portraits. Which photos of yourself are the hardest to look at? Which school portraits? Which year? And what makes them hard to look at? The goal of this exercise is not necessarily to remember more stories, though that might happen. The goal is to connect to the younger you. And I should say the younger yous, because there are a lot of them. Your life in first grade may have been very different than your life as a sophomore in high school. As you are looking at the photos, pay attention to your affect. Do you get a little dysregulated when you look at certain photos? If so, which ones? And why do you think that this particular photo is a little bit dysregulating for you right now? Why might this particular photo be affecting your body so much as you look at that boy or that girl? A third thing you can do if you don't remember much from your growing up years, find the films that move you and watch them repeatedly. What scenes from what movies affect you emotionally? You don't need to know why you are moved by a particular scene. A recent personal example of this, Hamilton, it moves me to tears in about a dozen different places. I'm not sure why, but there's a reason. Your eyes do not tear up randomly. If you are tearing up, something deep inside of you is being touched. What movie scenes make you tear up? What scenes make you sad? What scenes make you angry? What scenes are too hard to watch again? You want to find the movie scenes that move you and watch them over and over and over. And then be curious. Why might this scene be moving me? How is it moving me? What am I feeling? Carve out some alone time and watch a scene from a movie that you know affects you emotionally. And when the scene is over, hit the pause button and just notice what comes up inside. Just notice what you are feeling. Notice the sensations in your chest, in your gut, in your back. Okay, what does any of this have to do with remembering stories from childhood? Well, your body holds memory. I know that's an odd sentence, but it's true. If you want to understand more about this, you can listen to podcast episode 11 about implicit memory. But suffice it to say for now, your body holds memory. Therefore, when you watch a film scene and you find yourself moved emotionally, you actually are remembering something. Neural networks in your brain are firing that have fired before. That's what memory is. Neural networks in your brain are firing that have fired before. This is why seemingly small fights with your spouse or a close friend can be such a big deal emotionally, because you are not only feeling stuff in the present. No, the present situation is connecting you to big feelings from the past as well. And when you watch a film scene that moves you, you are connecting often to big feelings from your story, from the past. And that is data. It's data that will lead you deeper into understanding your story in more depth. Okay, number 4, music. Music. What songs move you? Have you gathered those songs into a playlist that you can listen to when you want to access your heart? Again, you don't need to know why the song moves you. Make playlists of the music that moves you. I don't care what genre the music is. All different genres. You need to find the songs that affect you emotionally, put them in a playlist, and then carve out some alone time and just listen to that music and see what comes up inside. By the way, the reason these activities are helpful, photo albums, film scenes, music, the reason these activities are helpful is because they allow you to access the limbic portion of your right hemisphere, your right brain. And so you can combine them. In other words, what would happen if you looked at photos of yourself as a boy or a girl while listening to music that moves you? I dare you to try it. I dare you to try it and see what comes up. Here's the point. Beauty opens you to truth. Art opens you to truth. Beauty will open you to the truth of your story. Beautiful things like film and music may bring particular memories to mind, but even if they don't, beautiful things will connect you to your emotions and to your bodily sensations, and that is remembering. You don't have to remember narrative to remember. You have to let your emotions flow. Number 5, another option that might help you remember stories. What if you went back to your elementary school or middle school? Geography often unleashes memories in an unexpected way. What if you drove back through the neighborhood you lived in when you were an 8-year-old boy? Or stood at your school bus stop? If you can't physically go to these places, pull them up on Google Earth and just look at the houses you lived in when you were growing up. Look at your elementary school. Number 6, pay attention to your present day-to-day life. Your present will give you clues to your past. Your present day-to-day life will give you clues to your past stories. What evokes strong responses from you now, in your life now? What pisses you off? What makes you anxious or fearful? Do you have a sense of why those particular circumstances elicit the response of anger or of anxiety? Might there be a connection to your story? And be especially open to quote unquote negative emotions that you experience in your life now. Emotions like jealousy, fury, contempt, shame. As you are going about your day, pay attention to your body and your internal experience, especially when your body is uncomfortable or distressed or dysregulated. When you are feeling those big feelings, a helpful follow-up question is, have I felt this feeling before? If so, when? How far back in my story does this feeling go? When have I felt this feeling before? Has it always been with me? And don't discount connections that don't seem connected. In other words, often the answer to when have I felt this before doesn't seem to make sense or have any relationship. But with more openness and time, the connection will become clear. For example, suppose, hypothetically speaking, suppose you're out kayaking with your 12-year-old daughter and you find yourself becoming fearful as other power boats come somewhat close to her. And your spouse who is with you is not nearly as concerned as you. She's just having a grand old time being out on the water, but you're anxious and fearful. Why might that be? Why am I freaking out and my wife is totally calm? As I reflect on what I'm feeling, the fear of other boats, I remember back to being on a sailboat with my dad as a kid and how I felt that I was the one who needed to be assessing the safety of the situation because he wasn't going to do it. Your big feelings in the present always give you clues to the stories in your past. You are not having big feelings randomly. They are linked to your story and they hold clues to your story. Number 7, some of you have stories about things that happened so many times that you don't remember any one particular incident. And since you can't remember any one particular incident, you don't feel like you can write the story. So for example, you know that your mom would frequently come to you for hugs and for comfort. She would look to you to make her feel better. And this happened with such frequency that you actually don't remember any one time that she did it. Please hear this. You can write a story that is an amalgamation of dozens or hundreds of memories. Making up a story is not lying. Lying is far more about a refusal to tell the truth. When you make up a story that happened hundreds of times, even though you don't remember a particular episode, you are telling the truth. You are not lying. We tend to think that telling the truth means recounting eyewitness testimony, so that what we write accurately describes what a video recording of the incident would reveal. That's not what telling the truth is. In fact, you can't do that. You can't. There are very, very few people on Earth with a photographic memory. Very few people that even have the brain capacity to tell a story that would be consistent with a video recording of what actually happened. The brains of 99.9% of people are not able to remember what we call eyewitness detail, i.e., you are not able to perfectly recall the facts of any stories in your past as if you were watching a movie of the actual event. That's just not how memory works. Don't let the fact that you don't remember everything perfectly keep you from writing the story. Number 8, ask your siblings if you have them. Contact brothers and sisters and say, I'm trying to remember what it was like for us growing up, and I just can't remember much. Do you remember any stories of things I said or did growing up? Do you remember any stories that involved me as when I was a younger boy, when I was a younger girl? Think about family lore. What are the stories that got told at holiday dinners? Either stories about you or your siblings or your parents. Family lore often gives insights into your story, and it will often prompt additional memories, additional stories. Now, last, some of you have to come to terms with the fact that your growing up years were devoid of goodness. Sometimes not being able to remember much is because your story is one of neglect. There's simply very little of substance to remember. Stories of neglect are harder to locate, but no less damaging, and often they're more damaging for their lack of obvious cause. Suppose we were sitting at a coffee shop, and you were insisting that you don't remember any stories of harm. You just didn't remember anything bad ever happening to you. And so I say to you, okay, well, tell me about a time when you felt emotionally comforted by your mom after a hard day. Or tell me about a time when you felt really celebrated by your dad. And you can't think of anything in answer to those questions. That's a really big deal. Some of you had growing up experiences that were devoid of goodness. Your parents didn't get a divorce when you were a kid. Your dad didn't physically hit you, abuse you. You don't have a history of sexual abuse. But even though your dad never hit you, he never hugged you either. I mean, do you have any idea how tragic it is that you can't tell me stories of when your mom sat on the edge of your bed after a hard day and was truly attuned to you and provided genuine comfort and pursued your heart with a sincere desire to know how you were and what was troubling you. It's easy to minimize your story when you don't remember much. But there's a reason you don't remember much. Some concluding thoughts. Ask God for help. Ask God to reveal a story to you, just one. You need not strive to remember things. Please, this is not about striving. Memories will come as you are ready for them. You don't need to make it happen. Instead of racking your brain for the memories that will unlock your understanding of yourself, instead of that, why not cultivate kindness and curiosity toward yourself in everyday moments? When it comes to healing from trauma, kindness and curiosity will take you much further than you think. And you can start with kindness toward the blank spaces in your memory and curiosity about those years that you don't remember much about. In fact, consider this. What is the posture toward the younger you? Is your posture toward that 7-year-old boy or that 11-year-old girl one of kindness? In other words, do you like her? Are you fond of him? If your posture toward the 11-year-old girl is one of contempt and cruelty, why would God bring memories to mind of that 11-year-old girl? God is fiercely committed to protecting that girl. I know. Someone is thinking, if God was so committed to protecting her, why did he let her get abused in the first place? That's an excellent question. It's also a different podcast episode. Okay, hopefully that gives you some direction, some sense of directions to go in. Remember that if you go to my website, you can get a free document that summarizes everything I've said today. And it also provides some exercises that I didn't talk about to help you remember your stories. Just go to my website and click on resources. Moreover, if you want additional help in writing out your stories, I can highly recommend 2 resources. The first is a book and workbook called To Be Told by Dan Allender and Lisa Fan. And the second is the online course called To Be Told that you can access by going to theallendercenter.org. It's $179. It's worth every penny. Your story is worth every penny of investment. Trust me. So the book, workbook, To Be Told, the online course, To Be Told. Thank you so much for listening. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please consider supporting it financially by going to my website, downloading the Place We Find Ourselves app, and you can sign up for as little as $3 a month or $30 per year. A bonus, when you do that, you'll receive episodes 4 weeks before they are released publicly. Have a great couple of weeks.